In one of the most charged moments ever broadcast from Capitol Hill, Jasmine Crockett calmly set a stack of verified messages in front of President Trump, and the nation witnessed his reaction unfold live. Cameras surrounded the room, perched on tripods, balanced on shoulders and suspended high above the crowded hearing chamber like vigilant eyes. Bright lights shone down on the long mahogany table where Trump's legal team was seated. Each lawyer flipped through hefty folders as if mere paper could protect them from the storm ahead. The scent of stale coffee mingled with fresh copier ink. In the air, Representative Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, the microphone capturing every subtle shift in her voice. She wore a deep blue blazer that stood out sharply against the beige walls. Her eyes were steady, unblinking, scanning the faces at the witness table one by one. She wasted no time. "Mr. President," she said clearly, her voice cutting through, the rustle of papers and quiet murmurs. "There is a matter of national concern here." A ripple of reaction moved through the packed gallery. Journalists glanced up from their laptops, some pausing mid-keystroke. A photographer raised his camera, sensing a moment worth capturing. Trump sat rigidly at the head of his team, turning, his gaze toward her. His expression remained neutral, but his right hand made a slow, deliberate move toward the stack of notes before him. Crockett didn't flinch. "Before we proceed with policy questions, I'd like to enter into the record a set of materials my office received this week. These include a verified text message exchange and a signed affidavit from a witness with direct knowledge of a personal relationship you have kept hidden from the public." Reporters adjusted microphones, the tension thick in the air. Every word counted now. Trump's lawyer, a tall man in a charcoal suit, leaned in to whisper urgently to his client. Trump's eyes stayed locked on Crockett, while his other hand gripped the table's edge more firmly. Crockett pulled out a manila folder and raised a printed sheet for the cameras to capture. "These messages," she said, "are time-stamped and authenticated by an independent expert. They document a series of private meetings between you and an individual who, according to our evidence, has received significant financial and logistical support from entities with business before." "The White House!" Gasps erupted from the back rows. Somewhere, a chair scraped loudly against the tile floor. Trump's attorney quickly interjected, "Madam Representative, we object to this line of questioning on the grounds of relevance to the president's private relationships." Without raising her voice, Crockett responded, "The relevance is clear. When a personal relationship intersects with official decision-making, the American people deserve to know. This is not about private life. It's about public trust." A Washington Post reporter furiously scribbled notes, while CNN's live feed zoomed in on Crockett's hands as she slid the evidence toward the clerk for official entry. Trump leaned forward, addressing his microphone directly. "Representative Crockett, this is a disgrace. You're wasting the country's time." Her reply was immediate and unwavering. "Mr. President, if defending the integrity of public office is a waste of time, then we are in far deeper trouble than I realized." The room held its collective breath. Even the guards stationed near the door appeared motionless. From the back, a cameraman whispered to a colleague, "This will be everywhere within the hour." Trump glanced at his legal team once more. His lips moved slightly in a private exchange, inaudible to microphones, but his eyes, usually quick to dart toward allies or cameras, remained fixed on the table far longer than usual. Crockett turned a page in her notes and leaned back just slightly, signaling she had more to reveal, but was choosing her moment carefully. The audience sensed it. This was no random comment. It was a deliberate, calculated opening strike. In news control rooms, producers barked orders. "Get that clip ready. We're leading with it." A Fox News anchor, watching from the New York studio, tapped their earpiece and murmured, "Cut the B-roll. Stay on Crockett. She's owning this." Before moving to her next question, the power dynamic had already shifted. Trump's team still held their talking points, but for the first time that morning, they were reacting instead of controlling the narrative. What no one in the hearing room yet knew was just how far Crockett was prepared to push and how much she had held back for this precise moment. With a calm, relaxed rhythm, Crockett didn't break that flow. She built on it. "Mr. President," she said at one point, "we appreciate your willingness to address concerns about transparency today." Her tone was polite enough to disarm him, but vague enough to mean anything. Trump nodded slightly, resting his chin on one hand. "Course," he said. "Transparency is important." Her eyes never left him. "You've spoken publicly about your administration's commitment to preventing conflicts of interest. I'd like to ask a few questions about how you ensure personal relationships never influence your decision-making." The shift was subtle, but it was the first crack in the morning's polite atmosphere. Across the room, one of Trump's aides straightened in their seat. "I have no conflicts of interest," Trump replied firmly. "I've been very clear about that." Crockett flipped through her binder, her fingers pausing on a tab marked in red. "And to your knowledge," she continued, "no personal acquaintances have financially benefited from policy changes your administration has made." Before he could answer, Trump's attorney interjected, "That's an incredibly broad question, Representative." "The president has countless acquaintances." Crockett kept her voice steady. "Then let's narrow it down." She glanced at her notes, then back at the president. "Between March of last year and July of this year, did you meet privately with someone who has received funding or resources connected to federal contracts?" Trump frowned slightly and leaned toward his microphone. "I meet with all kinds of people. That doesn't mean anything improper happened." She smiled faintly, not a smile of amusement, but one that said she already knew the answer. "I'll come back to that." From there, she let the tension simmer. She moved on to unrelated topics: trade negotiations, education funding, rural health care, initiatives. But every so often, she'd slip in a question about meetings, travel, or informal gatherings. It was like slowly tightening a net, unnoticeable unless you were paying close attention. By the time she circled back to her original question, Trump had found his rhythm again. His legal team relaxed somewhat, thinking the morning would pass without incident. Then she gave a small nod to the clerk. Two aides quietly entered from a side door, each carrying a sealed envelope. They handed them to her wordlessly. It wasn't yet time for the reveal. That would come later. But it was the first visible sign that she had something tangible, something real. The White House aides in the gallery exchanged glances. A producer from MSNBC leaned over to whisper to their camera, "Operator, keep both of them in the frame." If anyone thought Crockett was bluffing, the weight of those envelopes suggested otherwise. She asked one last question in that segment, something so routine it almost erased the tension she had built. "Mr. President, do you stand by your previous testimony that all personal relationships unrelated to official duties have remained entirely private?" Trump gave a small laugh, waving his hand dismissively. "Of course, I have nothing to hide." Crockett closed her binder with a quiet snap. "Good to know," she said almost casually. "We'll revisit that in a moment. But a moment in congressional hearings can feel like an eternity, and Trump had no idea how quickly the balance of control was about to shift. The moment she said, "We'll revisit that in a moment," something subtle changed in the room. It wasn't dramatic. No raised voices, no pounding on the table, but for those paying attention. It was like watching storm clouds slowly drift across a clear sky. Trump's team didn't notice right away, but a few reporters did. You could see it in the way they sat up straighter, hands hovering over keyboards. Crockett knew this was the, turning point. The earlier questions had softened the ground, but now she was walking right up to the edge of the cliff. She adjusted the microphone slightly, letting the small metallic scrape carry just enough to remind everyone she still had the floor. "Mr. President," she began again, Earlier, you stated that no personal relationships have influenced your decision-making in office. I want to ask you something very specific. On May 17th of this year, did you spend time at the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in Miami? Trump's head turned slightly, eyes narrowing. I travel a lot, he said slowly. I've been to Miami many times. I don't remember every single date. That's fair, Crockett replied, flipping open the red-tabbed section of her binder. But perhaps this will help jog your memory. On that date, hotel security logs show a guest under an assumed name checked into a suite just 2 doors down from yours. The suite was paid for in cash. The person who checked in matches the description of a woman frequently seen entering private events hosted by you and members of your staff. The room fell silent. Someone's pen rolled off the table in the press section, the soft clatter drawing. A few eyes before snapping right back to Crockett. Trump leaned forward. You're talking about a guest at a hotel. This is nonsense. People stay in hotels all the time. She didn't look up from her binder. That's true, but according to witness statements, you spent over 3 hours in that suite that evening. Now the shuffle started. His legal team passing papers between them, whispering under their breath. Trump's attorney finally spoke. Representative, we object to the insinuation. Crockett's tone stayed even. I'm not insinuating. I'm stating what the evidence suggests and will allow the public to decide how to interpret it. Trump pushed back in his chair slightly, glancing toward the cameras. This is nothing but a hit job. You're wasting everyone's time with baseless claims. But Crockett didn't take the bait. Instead, she leaned forward slightly and asked, Do you know a woman by the name of Veronica Hale? The name hung in the air. No one in the gallery moved, but a few reporters began typing furiously, unsure yet of the context, but certain it was important. Trump hesitated. His mouth opened slightly, before he closed it again. I meet a lot of people. I don't remember every name. Crockett gave a small nod. That's understandable. For the record, Mrs. Hale is a former event coordinator who has done contract work for multiple political fundraisers, including one at Mar-a-Lago, last year. She has also received consulting payments through a company that, according to federal filings, saw an unusual spike in revenue after a defense procurement decision was made by your administration. A murmur swept through the gallery. The cameras zoomed tighter, catching beads of sweat forming along the side of Trump's temple. Trump's lawyer interjected again, This is speculative. Crockett cut him off with precision. It's documented. The payment is a matter of public record. What is not yet public is the affidavit from Miss Hale, in which she describes the nature of her relationship with the president, including private meetings in multiple cities while policy negotiations were underway. Trump's eyes flickered toward his team, but for a moment he didn't speak. Crockett let the silence stretch long enough for the cameras to capture the tension, but not long enough to be seen as stalling. I'll be entering that affidavit into the record later this session, she said finally. But for now, I'd like to ask the president again. Do you deny any personal relationship with Miss Hale? Trump leaned forward, speaking slowly into the mic. I have no inappropriate relationships. This is a witch hunt, plain and simple. Noted, Crockett replied, closing her binder halfway. The public will have the opportunity to review the evidence and make up their own minds. Across the room, you could feel the anticipation building. Everyone knew she wasn't finished, not with this line of questioning, not with this witness, and certainly not with the president. But the real blow was still in her pocket, waiting for the exact moment when she could drop it and make the room stop breathing altogether. The clock above the committee room door showed just past 11:02 a.m. The air inside felt heavier now, though no one had moved much. Crockett sat with her binder closed, hands resting lightly on top of it like someone holding a secret too big to ignore. The earlier questions had been deliberate steps on a staircase, each one leading to the moment she now controlled completely. She gave a small signal to the clerk. 2 aides entered from the side door again, this time carrying a flat-sealed evidence box. It was the kind of box used for official document transfer, labeled in bold black marker. Exhibit 14, Verified Communications. The sound of the latch clicking open cut through the quiet. Cameras tilted forward, zooming to catch every movement. Inside the box was a stack of printed text messages, each page stamped with a digital verification seal from a third-party authentication firm. Crockett looked directly at Trump. "Mr. President, these messages are between you and Miss Veronica Hale. They are time-stamped, geotagged, and verified by an independent expert. Do you recognize these communications?" Trump leaned slightly toward his attorney, whispering something. The lawyer's face stayed impassive, but his hand moved quickly to his notepad. "I don't know what you're talking about," Trump said finally. His voice lower now. Crockett flipped to the first page. "This one, dated May 17th at 7:42 p.m., Miami. The message reads, 'Suite is ready. No press here. Same arrangement as last time.' The reply from you 15 minutes later. 'Good. Keep it quiet. We'll talk about the deal.'" There was no gasp this time, just a sharp, collective intake of breath from the gallery. The difference was telling. The first hint had shocked them. This was confirmation. Trump shifted in his seat. "Anyone can fake messages. This is nonsense." "They're authenticated," Crockett said evenly. "Your phone carrier has verified the origin. In addition, the hotel's security footage shows you entering the suite and leaving 3 hours later accompanied by Miss Hale." One of the Republican members of the committee leaned into his microphone. "Madam Representative, this is an outrageous spectacle." Crockett turned slightly, her voice steady. "It's an accountability hearing. We are here to determine whether personal conduct has influenced national policy. The connection between Miss Hale's company and recent defense contracts makes this a matter of public trust." She handed the first packet to the clerk, who stamped it and slid it down to the stenographer. Every camera in the room followed the movement of that paper. Trump's attorney tried to redirect. "Representative Crockett, you're engaging in political theater." She interrupted, not with anger, but with precision. "Theater is make-believe. This is evidence." Then she pulled out the second piece, the affidavit. The pages were thick, stapled, and marked with a notary seal. This sworn statement, signed by Mrs. Hale under penalty of perjury, detailed multiple occasions on which she met with the president during ongoing policy negotiations. It also described discussions regarding her company's interest in defense-related contracts. Trump's posture changed. His shoulders tensed, his gaze darting briefly toward the rear of the room. It was the kind of involuntary movement that even seasoned politicians have trouble hiding. Crockett placed the affidavit on the table in front of her, but didn't slide it forward just yet. "Mr. President, I'm going to give you one more opportunity to address this before it becomes part of the official record." "I have nothing to address," Trump said, his tone rising. "This is a disgrace. You're trying to smear me because you can't win on policy." Crockett let the words hang for a moment, then without saying a word, she pushed the affidavit toward the clerk. The cameras caught every inch of the paper's journey across the table. The clerk stamped it firmly. The record was now public. From the press gallery, someone muttered under their breath, "That's it. That's the headline." Trump spoke again, this time looking directly into a network camera. "This is all fake. Every bit of it. You'll see." But Crockett wasn't speaking to him anymore. She turned slightly toward the audience in the gallery, her voice calm but pointed. "The American people deserve leaders whose decisions aren't clouded by personal entanglements, especially when those involve taxpayer dollars and national security." No one missed the emphasis. At the far end of the room, a producer whispered into a phone, "We need the graphics ready. It's going live in 2 minutes." Crockett sat back slightly, folding her hands on the desk. She had just placed a grenade in the center of the table, and everyone knew it. But grenades aren't meant to sit quietly. In the next exchange, Trump's reaction would prove just how dangerous the blast could be. The stamp from the clerk's desk still echoed faintly in everyone's minds. It was the sound of something crossing the line from allegation to official record. For most presidents, that would have rattled them. But Trump wasn't most presidents. He thrived in confrontation, or at least he liked to appear as though he did. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, speaking directly into the microphone, with clipped force. This is the kind of political garbage people are tired of. Lies, fake documents, a setup. From the back row, a CNN camera operator caught the moment in sharp close-up, the flush creeping into his cheeks. The way his jaw worked before each sentence, Crockett didn't react. She didn't even look up from the binder she was flipping through. That, more than anything, seemed to get under his skin. "You think you're scoring points here?" Trump continued. "You're just making yourself look ridiculous. Everyone knows this is a witch hunt. You've got nothing, nothing." Jasmine finally looked up, her gaze steady. "Mr. President, personal attacks don't change the facts. The evidence is entered into the record. It's available to every American who wants to see it." He waved a dismissive hand. "The so-called evidence is fabricated. I'll have my lawyers deal with this joke of a hearing." "Your lawyers are here," she replied calmly, "and I've addressed them already." That got a small ripple of reaction from the gallery, just enough to make Trump shift in his seat. One of his attorneys leaned in, whispering rapidly, perhaps advising him to let it go. But Trump wasn't built for letting things go. "Let me tell you something," he said, pointing a finger at Crockett. "You people have been after me from day one. And you think you can throw in some personal gossip and make it look like corruption? It's pathetic." Crockett didn't blink. "If it were gossip, Mr. President, we wouldn't be here. But when private relationships intersect with public contracts, that's not gossip. It's oversight." There was a pause, not long, but long enough for the cameras to catch him glancing toward the side of the room, scanning for something or someone to break the moment. "You've been reading too many tabloids," he muttered into the microphone, "and now you're trying to turn Congress into one." She kept her tone measured. "The difference, Mr. President, is tabloids don't require sworn affidavits and third-party verification." A faint murmur ran through the audience again, not loud, but carrying the energy of people recognizing a clean hit. Trump leaned back, slightly, gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles whitened. "I don't have time for this nonsense. The country's got bigger problems." "That's true," Crockett said. "But corruption at the highest level of government happens to be one of them." The air felt thick with the back-and-forth tension, every sentence landing like a body blow. Trump's legal counsel shifted uncomfortably, rifling through their papers as though they might find a silver bullet hiding in the fine print. From the press table, a reporter from the Boston Globe scribbled a note in all caps. Trump shaken, not letting go. "Look," Trump said. Forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he said, "I've been through a lot worse than this. You're not the first person to try to take me down. Won't work. Never has." Crockett tilted her head slightly, as if weighing her next words. "Mr. President, this isn't about taking anyone down. It's about holding the most powerful office in the country to the same standard we'd expect from any public servant." For the first time, Trump didn't respond. Immediately, he shifted in his seat, glanced briefly toward his lawyers again, then back at her. The silence stretched just long enough for the room to feel it. From the far corner, a voice from one of the network crews whispered, "This is the clip. This is the one they're going to run." Trump finally spoke, but softer this time. "You think people care about this? They don't. They care about jobs, security, making America great again." "And part of making America great," Crockett said, "is making sure no one, no matter how powerful, puts personal gain ahead of the public good." It was the kind of line that didn't just land in the hearing room. It was built for television, built for replay. But while the words were hitting home in that chamber, the real war for public opinion was already exploding outside its walls. The president's attorney, a tall man with slicked-back hair and a reputation for aggressive cross-examination, finally decided he'd had enough of letting his client spar alone. He adjusted his tie, pushed his microphone forward, and leaned in as if ready to reclaim the room. Representative Crockett, he began in a voice calculated to sound both authoritative and dismissive. This committee is supposed to be addressing matters of legislative oversight. Instead, you've turned it into a stage for character assassination. Jasmine didn't move. She let him speak, her expression unreadable. You have presented so-called evidence that is flimsy at best, he continued. The American people can see through this. It's a distraction from the real issues this president is actually solving. Are you finished? Crockett asked calmly, her hands folded neatly on the desk. I haven't even started, he replied, leaning back with a smirk that was clearly meant for the cameras. Crockett opened her binder again, flipping to a fresh set of documents. I'm glad you said that, because I'd like to direct your attention to the documented timeline of Miss Hale's meetings with the president, cross-referenced against official policy actions and contract approvals. This is not character assassination. This is a conflict of interest inquiry, exactly what this committee is authorized to investigate. The lawyer's smirk faltered, but only for a second. You're stretching the definition of conflict of interest beyond recognition. She glanced down at the papers, then back at him. I think the public can decide whether it's a stretch when they see that every meeting coincided with a favorable development for her company. That's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. Trump shifted in his seat, clearly not enjoying the fact that his lawyer's attempt to steer the conversation was only giving Crockett more room to speak. The attorney pressed on. Representative, you're making inferences that can't be substantiated in a court of law. This isn't a court of law, she replied. It's Congress. Our duty is to shine light on questionable conduct before it becomes a legal crisis. A murmur rippled through the press section. Another. Clean shot. The lawyer tried again, this time raising his voice. You're attacking the integrity of the office without proof of wrongdoing. Crockett kept her tone even. We have proof of conduct. We have evidence of overlapping timelines between private meetings and policy shifts. Whether that's wrongdoing is for further investigation, but it's certainly relevant and the American people deserve to know about it. The back and forth began to take on the rhythm of a courtroom duel, each side trying to corner the other, each word weighed for both the live audience and the millions watching on TV. Trump, watching this exchange, broke in suddenly. You know what this is? It's a disgrace. Pure political theater. She's trying to make a name for herself. Crockett turned toward him. Mr. President, if asking questions that reveal the truth makes my name more known, I'm comfortable with that. The difference is, I'm not hiding what I'm doing. The line landed hard. Even a few members of the committee who had been silent most of the day shifted in their chairs. The attorney tried to redirect the questioning toward policy, military, funding, trade agreements, but Crockett refused to follow. Every time he threw out a broad topic, she pulled it back to Miss Hale, the meetings, and the contracts. Finally, she leaned forward and addressed the lawyer directly. If your client has nothing to hide, then why not allow us to review all visitor logs, phone records, and travel receipts related to Miss Hale for the past 18 months? That would clear this up quickly. The attorney hesitated just a beat too long before saying, those records, he argued, dealt with private presidential matters unrelated to this so-called investigation. Crockett allowed herself a faint, knowing smile. Then the refusal will speak for itself, she said. The gallery stirred, low murmurs, quick taps on phones, reporters firing off updates to their editors. The attorney stacked his papers neatly, a small gesture hinting the exchange was over. But Crockett leaned forward. We'll be issuing a formal request for those records by day's end, she continued, and I'll remind the committee that failure to comply may be considered obstruction. Trump shook his head, muttering under his breath. Across the room, A network correspondent jotted a bold headline: Crockett wins round. For now. Outside that room, the first ripples of their clash were already racing through phones, TV broadcasts, and social feeds. When the affidavit landed in the record and Crockett directly pushed back against both Trump and his lawyer, the tone of the hearing shifted. Inside, it still resembled a tense political back and forth. Outside, in the rapid churn of online media, it had already become a viral flashpoint. Within minutes, a political news account posted the first clipped video to X with the caption, Jasmine Crockett confronts President Trump over alleged secret relationship linked to defense contracts. Watch. 20,000 views poured in within the first 5 minutes. Not long after, the hashtags Crockett vs. Trump and Hearing Bombshell began climbing the trending charts. The clip jumped from news feeds into private group chats, Slack channels, and Instagram stories shared by people who rarely commented on politics. Cable news outlets, still airing the hearing live, began slicing the footage into replay segments. On MSNBC, one commentator said, "She's holding her ground like a prosecutor in closing arguments." On Fox News, the tone flipped entirely. "This is a smear campaign, plain and simple," a panelist declared, as a chyron read, "Trump under." Fire from Dem Rep over private matter, TikTok creators joined in, cutting the footage into rapid-fire edits. Crockett speaking evenly, Trump gesturing in irritation, the affidavit sliding across the table. One slow-motion version with dramatic music racked up 2 million views in under an hour. Political blogs lit up with takes. A progressive site ran Crockett delivers crushing blow to Trump's credibility, while a conservative YouTuber uploaded Jasmine Crockett goes too far. Here's why it could backfire. Ordinary viewers weighed in instantly. On Facebook, a retired teacher from Ohio wrote, "I don't care which side you're on, this is how you hold power accountable." Another reply beneath read, "She's grandstanding. This is all theater." Regardless of stance, every comment, every share, every repost fed the momentum. In a Los Angeles newsroom, a social media producer watched engagement charts spike. "This is going to top the charts by the end of the day," she told her editor. "We need 3 follow-up pieces ready." Meanwhile, the internet's political satire machine roared to life. One meme showed Crockett with the caption, "Cooler than your lawyer." Another split-screened her holding up evidence against Trump mid-sentence, captioned, "This meeting could have been an indictment." In the White House communications office, the mood was anything but light. Aides crowded around laptops. "We need a statement before this snowballs," one urged, already drafting. Another shook her head. "It's already snowballing. We're just slowing the avalanche." Crockett's own team was swamped. Her communications director, a wiry man in a gray suit, stood outside the hearing room juggling 2 phones, one for cable bookers, one for online outlets, fielding requests for post-hearing interviews. By midday, analytics showed the clip escaping the political bubble, spilling into general entertainment territory. Late-night talk show accounts were retweeting it with captions almost guaranteeing it a spot in that evening's monologues. Inside the chamber, Crockett remained unshaken, calm, collected, eyes on her notes, ignoring the storm outside. Trump, however, was clearly aware. Every so often he leaned toward an aide who discreetly showed him something on a phone. The frown that followed had less to do with the committee room and more with the fact that this fight had already spilled far beyond it. While the internet firestorm blazed, the real scramble happened in the halls of power, as the White House debated how, and how fast, to strike back. By the time the hearing paused for a short recess, the West Wing was already in full damage control mode. The image of Crockett sliding the affidavit across to the clerk had already become the defining visual of the morning, and everyone in the building's inner circle was aware of it. In the communications wing, staff crowded around a long table cluttered with open laptops, paper coffee cups, and half-eaten granola bars. A muted television on the wall scrolled closed captions in an endless loop of the same terms. Alleged. Affair, defense contracts, affidavit entered into record. "We need to choose our framing now," said the communications director, a stocky man in a navy suit tugging at his tie. "Do we flatly deny everything, or spin this as a violation of privacy?" Across from him, an aide tapped rapidly on her phone. "Half the outlets are already calling it corruption. If we go with privacy, we're basically implying it happened." A voice from the far end spoke up. "We go after her credibility. Make her the focus, not him." Upstairs, in the president's private study, two senior advisors sat across from Trump as he fumed. "They're not getting away with this," he said, pacing in front of his desk. "Did you see her face? She's enjoying this. We're going to hit her so hard she won't see it coming." One advisor tried to slow him down. "Sir, the more you attack her personally, the more it fuels her narrative. We should keep this procedural. Say she's misusing her committee powers." Trump stopped mid-step and pointed. "No, this is war. She wants to make me the headline? I'll make her the headline." In the press office, Press Secretary Erin Chandler was drafting the official statement. Her first version read, "These baseless accusations are part of a coordinated smear campaign by partisan extremists who fear the president's success. The American people are tired of these political games." She paused, then replaced smear campaign with political theater after the legal team advised against sounding too aggressive. A deputy leaned over. "CNN's going to run her. Closing remarks the moment the hearing ends. We can't let her have the last word." Next door, the social media unit was in full scramble. A young staffer was cutting together clips of the president answering unrelated questions during the hearing, moments where he looked composed and authoritative, to post on the official accounts. "We've got to flood the feed with these," he told a colleague. "If people see her clip first, we've already lost." But the flood was already here. Every major outlet's homepage carried the story. Headlines varied, some cautious, others blunt, but the common thread was clear. A sitting president had just been confronted live with allegations tied to a secret relationship and possible corruption. In the press briefing room, a Fox News correspondent was overheard telling another reporter, "Doesn't matter what they say now. This is the image that's going to stick. Her calm, him rattled." Back in the hearing room, Crockett sat quietly during the recess, sipping water as aides leaned in to whisper updates. She didn't smile or gloat, but her steady composure suggested she knew the White House's frantic counterattack was already part of her victory. Meanwhile, upstairs in the West Wing, the debate turned to whether they should drag Ms. Hale into the spotlight. "If she outright denies it, Crockett's momentum dies," one aide suggested. Another shook his head. "Or it blows up. If she stays silent, people assume it's true. If she confirms, we've got a scandal. If she dodges, the story drags on. There's no clean out." By 12:15 p.m., the official statement was finalized. The president categorically denies the false and defamatory claims made during today's hearing. These reckless allegations are a shameful distraction from the important work being done for the American people. It was posted on all White House platforms within seconds and dissected by commentators just as quickly. "Notice they don't dispute the documents exist," one analyst observed on air. "They just call the claims false." Inside the West Wing, frustration was thick. Phones buzzed nonstop. Lawmakers, conservative hosts, even foreign officials calling to ask what was going on. But it was becoming clear that Crockett's timing and poise had created a storyline they couldn't simply erase. By afternoon, the mood around Jasmine Crockett's Dallas office was unlike anything her team had seen. Calls poured in from national newsrooms, local radio, even overseas outlets. Her communications director juggled 3 phone lines at once, repeating, We'll release a statement after the hearing concludes. In the hallway, aides darted in and out of the main conference room with printed transcripts, updated analytics, and fresh lists of interview requests. The numbers were staggering. Her name had been mentioned over 1 million times on X since the morning session began. Cable networks replayed the moment she entered the affidavit into the record on repeat. Each with its own spin, Crockett herself stayed focused. Between breaks, she sat with a yellow legal pad, jotting questions for the next round. "This isn't over," she told her chief of staff. "We're going to follow the money." Her team recognized that tone. Crockett's strength had never been in a single viral moment, but in her relentless follow-through. The moment Crockett slid the affidavit toward the clerk had already become the morning's defining image, and every aide in the building was aware of it. In the communications wing, staff gathered around a long conference table cluttered with laptops, paper coffee cups, and half-eaten granola bars. The TV on the wall played on mute, closed captions scrolling endlessly. Alleged relationship, defense contracts, affidavit entered into record. "We need to choose our narrative now," the communications director said, a stocky man in a navy suit tugging at his tie. "Do we issue a flat denial or paint this as a privacy violation?" Across from him, an aide scrolled rapidly on her phone. "Half the outlets are already calling it corruption. If we say privacy, it sounds like we're admitting it." Happened. From the far end of the table, another voice broke in. "We need to discredit her. Make it about her character, not about him." Meanwhile, upstairs in the president's private study, 2 senior advisors sat across from Trump as he paced. "They're not getting away with this," he snapped. "You saw her expression? She's enjoying this. We're going to hit back. So hard she won't know what happened." One advisor tried to reason with him. "Sir, going after her personally will only strengthen her narrative. We should stick to process. Say she's abusing committee authority." Trump stopped pacing, pointed a finger. "No, this is war. She wants me to be the story? Fine. I'll make her the story." Downstairs, Press Secretary Aaron Chandler was drafting a statement. Her first version read, "These baseless accusations are part of a coordinated smear campaign by partisan extremists who fear the president's success. The American people are tired of these political games." She paused, then swapped smear campaign for political theater after legal advised against sounding too combative. A deputy urged her to hurry. "CNN's airing her closing remarks the moment the hearing ends. We can't let her have the last word." Nearby, the social media team was in overdrive. One young staffer was cutting together clips of the president calmly answering unrelated questions during the hearing. "We need to flood the feed with these," he told a colleague. "If the first thing people see is her clip, we've already lost." But the flood was already here. Major news sites had plastered the story across their homepages, some headlines measured, others blunt, but all centering on the same fact. A sitting president had just been publicly confronted with allegations linking him to a secret relationship and possible corruption. In the press briefing room, a Fox News correspondent was overheard telling another, "Doesn't matter what they say now, this is the image people will remember, her composed, him rattled." Back in the hearing room, Crockett remained at her seat during recess, sipping water while aides leaned in to murmur updates. She didn't smile or gloat, but carried herself with a calm that suggested she knew the White House's frantic reaction was already a victory in itself. Upstairs, discussion turned to whether to bring Miss Hale into the spotlight. If she publicly denies it, that takes the wind out of Crockett's sails, one aide suggested. Another shook his head. Or it backfires. If she says nothing, people assume it's true. If she admits it, it's a scandal. If she dodges, the story lives on. There's no clean escape. By 12:15 p.m., the official statement was locked. The president categorically denies the false and defamatory claims made during today's hearing. These reckless allegations are a shameful distraction from the important work being done for the American people. It went live on all White House channels instantly. Within minutes, commentators were dissecting it. Notice they never dispute the existence of the documents, one analyst observed on air. They just call the claims false. Inside the West Wing, frustration was mounting. Phones rang with calls from congressional allies, conservative hosts, even foreign leaders' offices, all asking what was happening. But as staff scrambled, one reality was settling in. Crockett's poise and precise timing had set a narrative that couldn't simply be erased. By the afternoon, the atmosphere in Crockett's Dallas office was unlike anything her team had experienced. Calls poured in from national networks, local stations, even overseas reporters. Her communications director, juggling multiple phone lines, kept repeating, "We'll have a statement after the hearing concludes." In the hall, aides darted in and out with printed transcripts, live social media metrics, and lists of interview requests. The numbers were staggering, over 1 million mentions of her name on X since the morning session began. Cable news kept replaying the affidavit moment on loop, each network putting its own spin on it. Yet Crockett wasn't swept up in the frenzy. Between breaks, she sat with a yellow legal pad, jotting questions for the next round. "This isn't over," she told her chief of staff. "We're not letting it fade after today. We're following the money." Her team recognized that tone. Crockett's reputation wasn't built on a single fiery moment. It came from the relentlessness that followed.